comes with it, and I am really passionate about accessibility. So my journey with accessibility started just about an year ago, uh, in 2019 May or so. So that was the first time when I realized that okay, accessibility is something, and I was so naive about it. I didn't know about it, and hence I was creating inaccessible websites, and it was not intentional. It was just because I didn't know. So I realized that many of us, many of developers who might be creating inaccessible websites, it's not because they don't want to create accessible websites, but it's because they are not aware about much about accessibility. So here I am. I will try to let you know about some things which we can see that how easy it is to implement some of the basic accessibility things, and it's not a rocket science kind of thing. So what will we cover? We will start with a basic introduction of accessibility and why should we care about it. Then we will see how we can affect the accessibility of websites through JavaScript, how we can make our website more accessible, and we will end with a conclusion. So the first question is, or the first thing is that what is accessibility? So accessibility, which is also termed as A11Y. So here 11 means the number of letters which comes between A and Y. It as a general term means that we are making the resources and serviceable available for everyone and usable for everyone, despite of any kind of disability that they might face, or despite of any kind of technical challenges. So accessibility, yeah. So we should be making services and websites, applications accessible for everyone. But why it is that much important? Because whenever we speak about accessibility term, we normally think about related to disability. So if the people are having disability, then only accessibility affects them, or it is useful for them. But no, that's not the case. We should care because the web which was created in the start, it was accessible by default. And Tim Berners-Lee, who is the W3C director and inventor of World Wide Web, so he had told that the power of web is in its universality, and access by everyone, regardless of disability, is an essential aspect. So if we go ahead and see the first website, world first website which was made, that is totally accessible. This is the world's first website, and if you see it's I'm not using mouse, maybe I'm just using the keyboard, and still I can navigate through all the links on it. So this was the first website created, and it is totally accessible. So what happened? I mean, why we started creating inaccessible website, or what happened in between? So we should always think that we do not know really what the user is going through. The user who is coming to our websites and our applications, they could be using it in many different ways. There are multiple types of disabilities that are there in the world. So as per WHO, there are 15% of population who face some or other kind of disability. They can be broadly categorized like permanent, temporary, or situational. And if we take off any of the examples from our right hand side of image, so let's say we talk about hearing impairment. So if a person is born deaf, it might be a permanent disability, but there might be a scenario that a person is undergoing some kind of ear infection, then it's kind of a temporary disability. Or maybe the person is at some place which has lots of noise around. We have all been in places like that, and so that is a situational disability where they do not really suffer from disability, but there's a situation which doesn't let you operate the same devices or same applications in the same way which you could be doing if that situation was different. Apart from that, there are conditions like cognitive and neurological conditions where people face some kind of difficulty in understanding complex content, or there are people who are very sensitive to animation or flashes, motion, or these kind of things. So the next slide, if you just pause and take maybe 30 seconds to read this slide, whatever is in on this slide. So I will just pause for 30 seconds and I ask you to just read this. Okay. So I think most of us would be able to read it properly, somewhat properly. So this is how people with a condition called dyslexia, they read text like this. So they have this condition and they see jumbled letters. What if our website, so this website doesn't contain lots of complex words, but what if the website contains lot of complex words and big sentences? So it would be difficult for them to comprehend that. So this is just one example. And then we have technical issues. There might be a slow internet connection, or we are using that website or that application on a smaller screen size. So is it responsive enough? Or an older technology, like, or maybe like IE or an older version of Windows. So the user might be accessing our content on any of the platforms, right? Then we have aging issues. The people who are aging, and with aging there comes a lot of issues. There might come lots of issues like motor disability. There might be loss of power and loss of hearing ability and so on. Then we also have people who can be in panic mode. So there is a situation, the situation came and they are stressed or they are in panic mode, they can't think clearly. So there is a very example which I heard in some other talk on some video that what if the user, let's say I am that user and I'm rushing someone through emergency in hospital, and then I have to fill a form before admitting them. Now I'm in panic mode, but the form which they have, it's like very complex and I cannot understand what I have to fill in and things like that. So I will not be able to fill it properly because I'm already in panic mode and I will not be able to understand that what I have to do. So this is just making things difficult for me. So there were some kind of examples on how different kind of users might be facing issues or in what situation they might be when they are accessing our content. So Hayden Pickering, you should read about it. His work, he has done a lot of work in accessibility world, and he has a book also on design patterns for accessibility. So he has very rightly said that everyone who uses a mouse basically is a keyboard user when they are eating with their mouse hand. So right, we always face some kind of situation where we want to just use the keyboard and navigate through the content. So I think now we know somewhat about there might be some issues which might be the users might be facing if the content is not accessible enough. So how can I start? So let's say that, okay, yeah, there are users who might be facing the issues. So how do I start learning about accessibility? How do I start? So I suggest like starting from like where you are. You can just read about accessibility and start implementing it in some basic terms. So these are the official websites of Y area. So they contain very good information of what accessibility is and different type of principles on creating different type of content which are accessible. And we have MDN site as well. So let me just navigate you through. So these are the accessibility principles which we can see, and we will know that, okay, what comprises of accessibility, what we should do, like how our content should behave in order to be more accessible to people. So you can go ahead and read through these and you will understand. Then MDN website also contains some good tutorials and documentation. Apart from that, mostly it is about thinking about the user needs, like thinking from the user perspective. Also, accessibility is about legal issues. So there Might be some circumstances when there are legal issues if the content is not accessible. But then again, it's more than that. Accessibility is not always about legal. So it's more than that. It's about thinking about the user needs, about user experience, about enhanced user experiences, and so on. So if we are thinking about users, we need to think from a broader perspective, like the user might be using keyboard or any other assistive technology, like they might be using screen readers or something. And so when they are using these devices or these platforms, so are they able to see our content in a proper structure? Are they able to navigate through our content in a logical order, in the way which we want them to see? Or have we enabled a keyboard navigation for them? Like, are they able to navigate through our content using just keyboard? And is our content being correctly interpreted by the screen readers? So we will see an example later in the session of what we mean by that. But this is just like a gist of what we should think about, how thinking from the user perspective. Okay. Now, normally when we talk about accessibility, we mostly think about HTML and CSS, like it's mostly around that. But does JavaScript play any role in that? I mean, I have even read articles where it's like JavaScript, is JavaScript the enemy of accessibility and so on. So I would like to say that no, JavaScript is definitely not an enemy of accessibility. JavaScript by itself does not make or break accessibility. So if you think of it, it's just like a tool. So just like we have a tool, maybe it's like a knife, maybe. So it's upon to us, the user, how they use that tool. So I can use that knife to cut the fruits, or I can use it to harm anyone. So it depends upon the intent of the user. So when talking from JavaScript term, we developers are the users of JavaScript. So how are we using this JavaScript as a tool will ultimately decide if we are affecting or breaking accessibility. So I will go through different some rules, some basic rules of how we can really enhance our website. So the rule number 1 is using semantic HTML. Now, I just told that we will talk about JavaScript. So why HTML? We will see just in a while. So for semantic HTML are the HTML tags which have a meaning attached to it. And they play certain kind of role. So let's say button. So button is a tag which is available in HTML, and it is used for creating buttons, as simple as that. So why should we use button? We can also use divs, right? We have normally been using it. I mean, I have also personally used some years back where we had to create some kind of fancy looking button, and then I ended up using divs for that, like using a div and applying lots of CSS on it, and then it looks like really this fancy looking button. But then, what are the benefits of using buttons over there? So there are 3 benefits. So whenever we use a semantic HTML, they are focusable by default, like depending upon role. So just like a button tag is used for interactivity. If I want to bring some interactivity into my website, I either use a button tag or an anchor tag. So when I use button, then it's focusable by default, and it also provides us keyboard accessibility. We will see it through demo what these points are, and also I have to write less JavaScript. So how? Let's see a demo for that. So, okay. So also I want to mention at this point, this is just like my side project. I was trying to create examples to showcase, and then I ended up creating a short website for that. So if you see, yeah, that is the button. So for button example, everything, it contains very less examples right now, but every example would contain some sort of description and demo and a code for it. So if you see, I have 2 places here, inaccessible button and accessible button. So now I am clicking on button 1. So here button 1 and button 3, these are created using button tag. And as the name suggests, the second button, that is a div, which I have just styled it to look as a button. And the point I wanted to prove that we can style a button in any way we want, just like div, right? So I don't need to use a div to make a fancy button. We can use buttons also to do that. So I'm using mouse and I click, okay, it works, good. Second one also works, third also one. So yeah, we are good, right? Just now think from a keyboard person perspective. Now I'm not using my mouse, I'm using my keyboard, right? So the keyboard users, they use tab, the tab key to navigate through all the interactive elements. So again, the interactive elements are like anchors, buttons, checkboxes, drop downs, etc. So here I have buttons and I want to tab through it. So I tabbed one. If you see a outline over button one, right? You can see it. So that means that my button one is now selected. Okay, I don't want to operate on button one. I want to go to button two. I click tab again. But okay, what happened? It just skipped button 2 and went to button 3. So this is the first issue with using non-semantic HTML tags for doing the work of semantic HTML tags. Now, this button is totally inaccessible to me as a keyboard user. So how do I access that button? So there is first thing which we go ahead and do it is that attach tab index to it, okay? So if I go ahead and attach tab index to it, it will be accessible now. So when I click on tab, it will focus on that. But then the other issue is that the keyboard users, they will not use their mouse to click on that button. They are going to use either space bar or the enter key to, trigger the action on that button. So now, since I am using my mouse and on this button, I will not be able to use either space or enter key because the click event which we have attached to this button. So the click event does not bring in keyboard accessibility for the non-semantic HTML. So if it's a button, so I will just show you an example of the code. Okay. So, okay. So what I have done that all for 3 buttons, we have the same thing written. For click handler, we are trying to just display some message down. It's working for first and third, but not working for second. It is because that was a div tab, and the div tags are not, they do not bring that keyboard accessibility. That means they will not be able to, understand that enter or space keyboard was clicked, and that's why they have to trigger the action. So for that, what we have to do that we will have to assign a role of it to button and add a key up event handler. Attaching a key up event handler is really important. So if we see the second example, if I go again, I'm using tab key. So I'm on button 1, I tab again, I come on second button, which is right, and I'm trying to use space or enter. So I will try to use space here. Okay. Sorry, yeah. So click, so I have used it. So clicked button 2 using keyboard. If I try to use enter, it's again clicking it. So because I will show you and I go back and I click on enter. So it's working. So when we are using a event handler for it, it will work. So how do we attach a key up event handler which will just fire for space and enter keywords? So there is a small key example, like this is the div button which we have when we have tab index 0. So what that will do, that it will make it tabbable, and then a roll of button which is used for accessibility. And then I have attached the event handler. We will need click handler still because we want it to be accessible by mouse as well. And then we need to add a key up event handler. And then we have on every event which is fired, whenever we are interacting with the DOM, the events which get fired, they have this key attribute attached to them. And it contains the value of the key which was entered. So, and the key is kind of descriptive. So it really takes the name of the key which you are entering. So for enter, it is enter, and for space, it's space. And for backward compatibility, although if we are trying to have it for IE also, then we have space bar as well. It is there in next slide. So we need to attach event handler for the div if we really want to use a div as a button. These are the extra steps which we need to do. So that's why when I told that we need a lots of less JavaScript code when we are using a semantic HTML. But then again, it's up to us, because we have different options and we really can use div if there is no other way really. We can use divs or spans for creating a button like element, but then we should always keep in mind that we attach proper event handlers to them so that they are accessible to the users who are other than mouse users. So, okay. Rule number 2, it's the carry on from rule number 1, that all the JavaScript functionality, they must be accessible through keyboard. So we just saw one example like tabbing through it and entering. Let's see how can users interact with our, content. So they navigate through tabs, which we saw. They can submit the form, so using space or enter key, or they can exit a current component. So there might be a model. So the example is that a model opened up, right? So if a model popped up, I would want to minimize it, maximize it, or maybe close the button. So I should be able to do that. And apart from that, we should also keep in mind that that model might be closed by using escape button as well, because when I'm using a keyboard, I would like to close that model using the escape button. Then there are some of the components like maybe carousels, or we have a horizontal scroll over some content. So these also should be, accessible through keyboard. So how do we make it accessible through keyboard is we can attach event handlers to the arrow keys. So up, down, left and right arrow keys. We can attach event handlers to those so that these are accessible through keyboard users as well. These are the important event key values. So like for enter, and for space bar, space, and space bar is for like I or edge maybe. Then tab, escape. So these are the keywords which we can use to check for which event was fired, like which key was pressed by the user. And then we can attach it very similarly. We just find the button and then we attach the event handler upon it using the conditions, and we do our whatever code we want to write, whatever action we want to perform when that desired key has been pressed by the user. So rule number 3 is that the event handlers must be device independent. So what do we mean by that? So there are different kind of events which JavaScript provides us. So there is a key up event, then there is also a mouse up event, key down, mouse down. So we must remember that we should always try to use key up and key down events instead of mouse down and mouse up. Because when we will use mouse up and mouse down events, again, these events are going to be triggered only when we use the mouse. When we are using the keyboard, they are not going to be used. And there might be, if at all, in worst scenarios, we have some requirement that we want to use some specific action. We want to have some specific action on mouse down and mouse up. We can add it, but still we should provide the subsequent on key down and on key up events as well, so that the keyboard users are not left out. I mean, so that we do not end up making that functionality inaccessible, totally inaccessible to the keyboard and other assistive text users. Then managing focus. So this is the 4th rule, which is how to manage focus of our content. So what is focus? So normally if you see here, so focus tells us that which element is currently active in our page. So if we have a page and there is some outline over it, we can easily see that, yeah, that is in focus now. So that is the current active element on my document. How it is useful? So the element which is in focus, I can click on it and I can see that which element is in focus by tabbing it. And it's also beneficial to a screen reader, because a screen reader or any other assistive text technology, they rely on that focus, because how will they know that which document is active now? So for that, they rely on that focus, on that outline. So normally when we are using semantic HTMLs or we are attaching event handlers, the focus is taken care of. But there are some complex use cases, like we have model interaction. So for model interaction, there, what can user do? So there might be some button or something which triggers the model opening. So the model will open, and then the user can go ahead and click on some button or escape, and the model should close. And between opening and closing of model, when the user taps on it, they should be able to interact within all the focusable elements or all the interactive elements inside the model. So they must be able to do those operations, right? So this is one use case for which we really have to write some JavaScript code. This doesn't come inherent with when we are creating the model. So let's see one example. Okay, so for models, we have, let's say that there is a button which is going to open model, and then some content and some other button somewhere else in website. Now tab on it. I am on the button which is going to create the model. I click on enter. Okay, so the model opened, but the model is open, but if you see the focus, right, that focus is behind it now. So it's still in the screen behind the model. So the user will have to, like, I click on tab again because I want to come to this model. Again, if you see, it went to the other button which is this side. And now after third click, will it come to this model? So this really confuses the user. So for us, we can see it, right, that something is happening. Okay, the focus is trapped behind the model and it will come after some time. I'm tabbing it and yeah, it came. But imagine the user is using a screen reader. So imagine we are just, I'm not able to see, I'm just using a screen reader, and I try to click on that button, who is going to open the model. So now, as a user, my expectation is now the model should be open, and whatever the next button was, that button was in model. So whatever it was, so I thought that that is in model. So it totally confuses the users when we are using model in this way. I click on tab and now it works fine. I click on tab, and now if I click on escape, it again will not close because we haven't done anything extra here till now. So it is highly accessible to the users. Okay. So let's see how we can make it more accessible. So this is the second example, right? So here I will show you how the movement should happen when we are using a model so that it's understood by all kinds of users. So we are here on the button. It says that click it to open the model. Okay, I click it. So the model got open, right? But if you notice, the outline also, the focus has moved now to the model automatically, right? So now the focus is in model, and I know that, okay, the first thing which came up is the cross button. If I click on it, it's gonna close my model. I can interact with it. And also, I will try to press escape key to close this. So I escaped it and it closed. And after closing of model, the focus again came back to the same button from where we started. So it really completes the flow, because now user knows that, okay, this was the place from where I started, and now after performing that action, I'm back at that place. So this depends upon use case to use case, but if we wanted that, this is possible. So now we can, how would this happen? For that, we have to write some JavaScript code. I will just walk you through that. So for the HTML part is there. This is a very short and sweet example. Again, this code is taken from internet itself. So there is this button, and on the click of button, this model gets opened up, and then we have assigned it some roles that, yeah, this is model dialog role to it. Then the main part comes in JavaScript. Okay, so let's come to JavaScript. If you see what we are doing here, first we take the model. Okay, this is my model element. And then we have buttons. We normally do that. We use check the buttons, which are the buttons, because we want to attach the event handlers to those. So the buttons are the three buttons, the open one, and then when we are in model, the close button and the submit button. These two will just close it. Now, what we want to do, that we want to have a variable which will store my active element. Okay. So why I'm calling it previous active element, because when we click on the button and the model opens up, I want to have a track of it, that from which element this model got opened. Then toggle just toggles the class, shows and hides the model. Focus restored. Okay. So the first interaction, the first event listener which we have is on the open model button. So when I'm opening the model, what I'm trying to do? First thing which I try to do is I save the current active element of document inside this variable which I created, which is previous active element. So this makes sure that I am keeping track of that. Now I toggle the model. It means that, okay, now the model should be visible. The third thing which we need to do is put the focus on the first interactive element of that model. It can be anything, depends upon a use case, but for simplicity, we are going to focus on the first interactive element of that model, which is the cross icon. So for that, there is a small utility which is written, get focusable element. So here it is. So for us in our model, there were only buttons. So what I have done, I have query selected all the buttons of my model. So this is a context which we pass, and I'm passing it model. So I say, hey, I need all the buttons which are available on that model pop-up. Okay. So I get an array of it, and what I try to do in that array, I am returning the first element of it, which is the cross icon. And when I get that element, I am just triggering the focus on it. That's how that cross icon, that close icon automatically got focused when we open the model. So now we are sorted on the opening part. Now closing part. So we can close it in three ways, right? There was a close model button, then there was another button, submit button, and then the third way is when we are trying to escape, right? So for the buttons, this will be pretty simple. I just want to toggle the model again with focus restored. What does it mean? So if you see the function, it does just toggles the model, like it will remove that active class from it, or it is going to hide our model. And then if you remember, we had saved the previous active element in a variable. So this active element, previous active element, is nothing but that button from which the model opened. So I'm going to focus it again. So I have that element, I trigger a focus on it, and that button got triggered. Again, I have an extra event handler written for the escape key. So for escape key, what we have done, that we have attached the event handler to the window. And I have a condition here which says that if the key, which the event which is there, the key of event, if that key equals to escape, then I again have to toggle the button. And I have this extra one because I want to toggle it only if that model is open. So if the model is open, I'm gonna toggle it. That is mean I'm gonna hide it, and again I'm going to restore the focus on the previous element, that is the button. So yeah, this is all about model. There is more to it, although, because there is more to it, which is that the focus should get trapped between the models. So if you see currently, this is one of the shortcomings which is not yet addressed. So if you tap again, normally what should happen is that tab should come back to the cross button. Instead, it goes now to the next focusable element. So this, I didn't keep it in the scope of this talk, but then there is a link which I have provided in the resources, which has the code for that too, and you can go ahead and implement it to trap the focus within the model as well. So moving on, rule number 5 is like honoring the user's device settings. So what do we mean by that? There are some users who might not be comfortable watching animations or flashing content or some, these kind of content. So they are not comfortable with it. And that's why we have these accessibility features in every device. So I'm using Windows currently. And if you see here, if you just type access, so I'm typing access, and there are lots of accessible settings which every device has. For me, what, okay, so there is display, ease of access, and we come to display settings. You see, we can have different kind of settings. These are all for accessibility settings. So what I mean by this rule is that we should honor if user has such settings enabled. We are going to see one use case, which is for animation. Now, what if you see here, I have so animations in Windows on and off button. Currently it is on, right? So it means that I am okay. If there are any animations on any website, go ahead and show it to me. But what if the user has disabled it? In those cases, we should have settings in our websites as well, so that we pause them, like we do not apply the animations if the user device settings does not want that. How we do that? So we have a CSS media query for that, which is called prefers reduced motion. So let me walk you through an example of that. Okay. So this is the website. This is the link for animation. On here you see, since the animation option is open now, and okay. So if you see, all these both are now animating. So I have taken the very basic example from React app itself. So these both are, I am able to see the animation, but as a user now, I am facing some difficulty and I really don't want to see animation because it's not comfortable for me. So I have that device, that setting disabled now. Now, if you see, this one is stopped. So the animation has stopped here. So it's all comfortable. But there is this inaccessible example. If you see, it's still animating. So it's still showing animation. So this, how can we achieve to accessible phase? Okay. So for that, two ways are there again. The CSS media query says that the styling which you do, the animation which you apply, we can have it in a media query. So if you see, I have a media query applied which says preferred reduced motion. So if the user has no preference for it, then go ahead and apply that animation. But if user has any preference, they do not want the animation, then this will not be going to be applied and we are good or sorted. But sometimes just using CSS doesn't work and we have to use JavaScript for that. So in JavaScript, we have a match media query, okay? So if we say match media and provide a query for it that does the user prefers reduced motion, and we have dot matches. So this is going to return me true or false. So if the user has selected false there, like they have deselected it, they have told that, okay, set it off, then I'm going to get a true for it, okay, because they have preferring to reduce the motion. In that case, I will not apply that class on my element. And if they have no such preference, I will go ahead and apply that set animation. And in that case, it will work just fine. And if this is not there, right? But so where this is used is if you see the next example. So I have a carousel here, okay? So in this carousel, if you see that by default, this is a bootstrap carousel, and by default, it has this animation of 3000 seconds. So it has an interval of 3000, like 3 seconds actually, sorry. So for 3 seconds, and every 3 seconds it updates. Now for this, I have written a JavaScript code so that I will apply that interval only if it doesn't match that query. So in these are the scenarios in which we might want to use JavaScript code explicitly so that we do not end up worsening users experience. So here it needs a data interval attribute, and what I have done that if it doesn't match that, so if the user has no such preference, I'm going to go ahead and apply that interval to it. So yeah, that is animation. Okay. The last rule is assigning the page titles for each route. So we have different routes for our website. So we must attach different titles for those. So how we can see that through an example is page titles. So here, if you see, what if I have user has multiple tabs open, okay, right? I have multiple tabs open, and now I'm trying to just hover over it or maybe tabbing through it to see which tab I'm currently on. So just by tab, it will not be very I will not be able to know or find out that which page I am on currently, right? So here I am on home page and I'm trying to check, okay, I was just wanted to go to some other tab, but also same page titles. If you see that Explore A11Y, they all show the same title. So that's why we will not be able to understand that which page contains what route. But instead, if we have, let's say like this, so we are at home page, it says, okay, home page, this is introduction, testing, contact us button. So if we have dedicated titles for all pages, it's going to be beneficial, not only for the users using assistive technology, but also for us, I mean, for all kinds of users. So, and it has a very simple code to make it possible. So we just need to attach a document title to our route, and we can have it in different way. For like in JavaScript, we can simply put it here. If we are having React, so in React, like so if we have class components, we can write it in component did mount, or if we are in a functional component, we can use a use effect to update it. Or there can be a better way wherein you can make a utility for it and assign titles as per the routes. Okay, so these were the examples which I wanted to show you. Now, okay, this all looks good that, okay, these are the things which we need to do. But how do we test for it? Like, how do we see if what I have written or what I have created, is it accessible or not? So for that, we have different tools and extensions provided. So I will quickly walk you through these. So this is in a browser. So let's say we are here and I open up inspect. So in browser, if you see, there is a lighthouse option. So if you go ahead on a lighthouse option on any website, you can go ahead on lighthouse option and click on generate report for accessibility. And it is going to give you a report of what are the accessibility issue and what are not the accessibility issues. So if you see here for this, we have one accessibility issue and we can improve on that. And it also shows you the code, that what is the code for it. So I think it's somewhere here. So it says that that might not be accessible. Okay, that is this code. So it doesn't have sufficient contrast. So it gives a very detailed and a nice report, and you can find out which ones you want to fix first, which one are more important ones, and so on. And on the similar thing, there is another Axe extension. So this does the same as Lighthouse. You have to install it as an extension to the browser, and then you can see an Axe in the DevTools. And then you can again analyze it in the same way. The third one, which is it's in Elements tab itself. So if you go to Elements tab, the way inspect, right? I'm going and I'm inspecting like this. So you also have, if you see, there are different panes, and this is the last one, which is accessibility pane. If you click on it, you can see the accessibility information of a single node which you want to see. So this is how the accessibility tree gets painted. So you can go ahead and analyze anything. So let's say I have this link. I want to analyze this link on how this will words in accessibility. So if you see here, it says that, yeah, okay, it has a content called introduction, its role is linked, and it can be focusable. So you can find out, you can inspect any of those and see if that is accessible and what are the properties assigned to it. So this is a very good thing. When we start using it, we will get more used to it and it will all make sense. And then we have the last one, which I love a lot, which is Wave. So for Wave, you have to add it as an extension and just right click on it and say Wave this page. And it's going to again show you details of what are the different things on your page, what are the different contents and layouts. So this is, I would suggest to explore these and see how much accessible are different websites in the world. It's really going to be fun. I have provided link of all those here. And also for development. So when we are developing the code, there are certain things available which we can use so that when we are developing at that phase only, we get to find that we are doing something wrong or we are trying to create something inaccessible, so that can be improved. So there is this web accessibility. If you, okay. So web accessibility is a VS Code extension. You can, it doesn't come with all the features. It has very limited features, but still it will show you somewhat. So let's say they are creating an input and all. So there will be an error, which is going to tell you that what is the issue with that element there. So let me show you very quickly. So if I will have an anchor tag, let's say a blank anchor tag or something like that. Okay, why it's not showing? Okay, there's something wrong with the system. I think I haven't installed it yet on this system, but it's going to show you the issue. So that input didn't have label and it showed. So you should go ahead and install it and see. It is going to inform you about some of the basic accessibility things. And then we have this ESLint plugin for JSX. So as the name suggests, it's only going to be useful when we have JSX code. When we're using React or using something which has JSX, we can have this installed, and in ESLint rules, we can mention it so that it goes and finds the accessibility issues. The third one is WebHint. This is also very similar to the first web accessibility extension, and it will also let you know of some of the accessibility issues. And most of the accessibility errors which we do are when we are creating the DOM element, so they really help. And okay, so yeah, so to conclude, whenever we are creating any content, any website, any application, we should always consider the users with wide range of abilities and technology. We should always keep in mind that there are more than one way to access our content, and are all those ways accessible? Will the user be able to access my content when they are navigating it through it by using some assistive technologies? We should use proper semantic HTML whenever possible. So I think it's always possible, but yeah, we should always use the proper semantic HTML. Then we must always, manage focus and keyboard interactivity. And this can be really done very simply. When we are creating a website, we should ditch the mouse and start using keyboard and see that the content which we are creating, is it accessible by keyboard? And normally accessibility is always considered as an afterthought, but it should not be as such. So we should and we must focus on accessibility just like we focus on everything else. So this should not be an afterthought. This is an inherent feature of web, and we must all work together so that we make the web more accessible and inclusive for different kind of users. Okay. Always code with accessibility in mind. I mean, just think about accessibility, just keep it in mind, just hammer it, just keep it in mind when you are coding, when you are applying styles, whenever you are testing, keep about accessibility in mind. So these are some of the resources. So you can go through them. These are really helpful, and they helped me a lot while preparing for the talk. And this fourth one is the website which I showed you in the demo today. So you can explore it. More examples will be added there soon. And then if you prefer to have the full functional code pen examples for it, so these links, this contain links which will contain full code for those. Okay. And I do have an action item for this session for you all. So it's more of a request. So pass on the learning. So if you think that it was beneficial, if you learned something, please pass it on, because the more we talk about it with people, the more people will get aware about it, and we all have equal responsibility towards it. Let's spread the light of awareness. Let's spread it. I mean, let's make everyone aware about accessibility. I mean, it's not rocket science. It's not that hard. We all can do it. We all can make it. So let's do that. So I will be really glad if you all could just pass on. I mean, just talk about it or start implementing some of the things. It will be really a win situation for all of us. So keep learning and stay safe. So stay safe, everyone. Keep learning, and let's all work towards a more inclusive world. So with that, thank you, and I'm open to questions. Okay.
Thank you, Anuradha, for giving us an overview, and the demo was really useful. And in fact, I just browsed over the website, which is currently work in progress, and I think all the examples are like really helpful over there. And once again, thank you for talking with us today. Yeah, feel free to, the floor is open for questions. You can ask your questions to Anuradha.
Sure, I'll ask a question.
Yes,
yep, go ahead.
You can hear me okay?
Yes, Daniel, I can hear you.
Great. How do you usually manage your workflow when you're considering accessibility? Will you do it as you go through building components, or do you tend to complete a feature and then review it and add your accessibility?
Whenever we are creating something, so when we are coding, so we go through accessibility through that time only. So whenever I'm creating something, so maybe I'm going ahead and adding some button or anchor, I will go ahead and think from accessibility perspective from that phase itself. So the best phase of start implementing accessibility is actually from the planning phase itself. So when we are planning to do any work, then only. So it's an equal responsibility actually for even the product managers and designers, then us developers, and then testers. So it should be at every stage. So, but yeah, whenever we code, we think from that perspective, and we do not leave it for later. So it's not something that we are trying to do it later. We do it when we are working on it. And it's, I mean, from my experience, it has never been a lot of work. I mean.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you.
I hope you implement some of these.
Yeah, I think, the better would be like, we can make this as part of our exit criteria in our feature request or the Scrum story itself, right? As a developer, when we are going to develop, the main criteria to check in is whether you have implemented accessibility there or not. So that way, even your code goes to test, it will have all the accessibility features in that.
Yeah,
correct. And all the test suite should contain the, if there's a button, if it is accessible or not. And it's much more than just keyboard. It's about all kinds of assistive technologies. So, and it should be, like the part of test suite which the testers are creating. If the QC is creating, they should have those criteria, those test cases as well. If they fail, the story fails and it should not pass on.
Of course. Great. Well, thank you for the presentation.
Thank you.
Any other questions we have? Okay, so if we don't have any other questions, I think we can call it an evening to all. Thank you all for joining today, and thank you, Anuradha, for speaking to the group. You can always reach out to her on Twitter if you have any additional follow-up questions. Thank you all.
Yes. Thanks a lot. Have a great day.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks, Bhaskar. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen.